I'm delighted that on my final show of 2020, I'm joined by Andrew Hastie, former SAS soldier, tipped for promotion to the Outer Ministry this week in the cabinet reshuffle that Scott Morrison's doing. Hastie always has the courage to speak out on issues of importance to Australia's national security and sovereignty. And Andrew, thanks for joining me. There's no more important issue than the one I have just raised about this leak of Communist Party data. Obviously, not every CCP member is a risk, but there are concerns here. What are they?
Well, good evening, Sharri. Good to be with you for your final show this year. There are concerns. As you said, not every CCP member is a risk. I'm sure there are very strong cultural and social incentives in China to be a member of the Chinese Communist Party. But nonetheless, if there are CCP members involved in institutions or projects of national significance in Australia, then we need to know about it. And as I've often said, the best weapons that we have as a democracy are transparency, scrutiny and sunlight as a way of safeguarding our sovereignty and things like our intellectual property.
I'm sure you'll have more to say on this, Andrew, tomorrow when you see the full extent of the story, which government agencies have been affected and which companies. But I want to ask you now about China more broadly and how we should handle the escalating tensions with China. You know, there's been suggestion from many people that we need to tone down our rhetoric to get the relationship back on track. But we've seen reports today as well suggesting that the Five Eyes partners are considering their own form of retaliation, of trade tariffs. What do you think is the best approach here?
I share the Prime Minister's view, and that is that we should stand up for our values, we should stand up for our interests, and we should always do so from a position of strength. I think that's what we've been doing as a government. Sure, we don't want to escalate things unnecessarily, but we must stand up for ourselves, and we've been doing that. China obviously has been applying pressure economically, it's been applying pressure politically, and just last week, of course, or 2 weeks ago rather, we saw that tweet about our troops. So the best thing we can do as a government, as a people, is stay the course, not blink. Politics is a contact sport, geopolitics even more so. You've got to be strong, you've got to be tough, and we just keep doing what we're doing in the national interest.
And in terms of imposing our own tariffs, do you think that's a good idea?
That's a decision for government, and that sounds like I'm hedging, but I'm a backbencher, obviously. I don't see all the information that government ministers have to bring together and fuse. And of course, decisions like that belong in cabinet. And given the sensitivities, I'll refrain from giving an opinion purely because I don't want to inflame things, which is in the national interest.
Understood. Now, look, we're going to talk about more about my big story in a moment. Robert Potter's coming on the show, but I do want to get into some other topics with you, Andrew, specifically the Bremerton Report and the fallout from it. Obviously, everyone knows you served in the SAS, and the Bremerton Report detailed 23 incidents of alleged unlawful killings of 39 Afghans by 25 Australian Special Forces soldiers, of course, mainly from the Special Air Service Regiment. Now, Defence Minister Linda Reynolds has described this as cold-blooded murder. Do you agree with her characterisation?
Well, I think there are two reports. There's the redacted version, which I've read from cover to cover, which has been available to the Australian public. And then there is the unredacted version, which I understand the Minister for Defence has read herself. Now, she said alleged. It's really important that she said alleged. And the Prime Minister, the Minister for Defence, myself and many others agree that our soldiers should have the presumption of innocence. That is very, very clear. So the words that she said that day, I won't put them in context, but we all have bad days in the office. And I know that she is behind our troops and she believes in a fair process. So she has my support in that.
Bad day in the office, there you go. Look, one person who has been on our TV screens a lot since this report came out is the Commando, Heston Russell. He has been quite critical. Do you agree with what he's been saying on air?
Sharri, as you said, I served in the SAS regiment for almost 6 years. I know the men, I know some of their families, and I talk to them regularly, but I would never, ever claim to speak for them. Heston Russell has never served a day in the Special Air Service Regiment. He cannot claim to be their spokesman, and I know the feedback I've received is that he is not. Moreover, I know members of the SAS currently serving were appalled by the way he attacked the Prime Minister the day after the Prime Minister defended our troops against the slur from one of those wolf warriors on Twitter. Our SAS are trying to regain the trust of our national leadership, not forfeit it further with cheap sledges on primetime television.
Very strong comments there, Andrew. Look, I'm also interested, and you are on fire tonight, I'm interested as well in your view on the Chief of the Defence Force, Angus Campbell. He originally said that more than 3,000 citations should be withdrawn. The Prime Minister has intervened. How wrong do you think the Chief of the Defence Force was?
Well, look, the meritorious unit citation has been the focus of discussion over the past few weeks. I'm very sympathetic to those members of the Special Operations Task Group who served honourably. I'm very sympathetic to members or families of the fallen who served as part of the Special Operations Task Group. Just yesterday I spoke to Ray Palmer up in Darwin, who lost his son Scott in 2010, who was killed in action while serving with the 2nd Commando Regiment. So people are hurting at the moment, and this has become a flashpoint. But in the end, the meritorious unit citation is not the main thing. Do you know what keeps me awake at night is thinking about, will we be ready for the next mission? Will we be ready for the next war? I know that's what drives the guys at the Special Air Service Regiment. I just spoke to one before I came on this program. They're worried about their next mission, rebuilding trust and getting on with the job. So whilst the citation is important, there are a lot of other issues here. We need to go through the process.
When you say you're worried that we might not be ready for the next mission, is that because of morale? Is that because you think that soldiers might be too afraid to actually kill their opponents when they get overseas?
There are a number of things. Morale, a lot of issues were identified by Justice Bremerton in his report. They've been worked on for the past 5 years, but 80% of the SAS currently serving never went to Afghanistan with the Special Operations Task Group, and they're the ones who are going to take the unit forward. They have our trust. They've done nothing wrong, and so my concern is that they feel under siege, that their morale is low, and indeed the capability suffers. And we just can't afford to. We're entering one of the toughest decades ahead. It's immensely challenging, and we might need to call on these men sooner rather than later. So we need to be ready, and that's why, yes, we need to rectify the issues as they've been identified. We need to go through the process, but we do need to get on with the job. And those guys have joined the regiment to take on the toughest missions government can give them.
I'm just interested, do you think there might be more of a hesitancy now when soldiers go overseas and are in war? Do you think they might second guess their actions and that could end up, risking or costing lives?
I think if everyone does their jobs in accordance with the laws of war, there won't be an issue. And again, what the Bremerton Report has identified is conduct that is unlawful, conducted outside the heat of battle and outside the fog of war. When we talk about the fog of war, what do we mean? Well, war is inherently dangerous. It's shaped by chaos, friction, uncertainty. People make mistakes. We're not talking about mistakes made in the heat of battle or in the fog of war. We're talking about incidents that were done with combatants who were secure and under the charge of Australian soldiers. So I just want to make that very clear. So if everyone does their job, there shouldn't be an issue, and that comes down to leadership and training, and that's what we need to get on with.
Andrew, you wrote a quite extraordinary piece in The Australian when this report first came out, where you spoke about, and you just kind of referred to it a bit then, about the war having its own dark energy, that it's inherently violent and even degrading. And you wrote about how you think our leaders today sanitise war when in fact soldiers are trained to kill and trained to win. How much of a problem do you think this was, how they sanitised war and, gave a different perception of it to the media?
Well, war is a contest of wills. It's inherently violent. It is degrading over time, and we sent people back 5, 6, 7 times. And over time you become hard of heart, especially if you lose friends and especially if you become desensitised to violence. But let's not forget why the Special Operations Task Force was deployed to Afghanistan. It was to force protect the elements who were doing the mentoring and reconstruction in Tarin Kot. When I got there in June, July of 2009 for the first time, back in April, a Dutch soldier was killed and 7 others badly wounded after a rocket was fired at the base. And so the job of the Special Operations Task Group was to go after those firing rockets, to go after those who were making the bombs, to go after the leadership, to protect everyone else who was doing that job. Now, that necessarily involved violence. Now, some people, it is alleged, went down a fire trail of their own and took matters into their own hands, and that will be sorted through the special investigation. But fundamentally, our soldiers went there in our name to protect people, and many, if not all of them, did it honourably, bar a few.
Andrew Hastie, thank you very much. Really appreciate your insights, very thoughtful as always, and thank you so much for joining me on the show so many times in 2020. Have a wonderful Christmas and look forward to chatting to you in the new year.
Thank you, Sharri. Always a pleasure.